It's the top of the hour, and again, we're counting hours to Women's Day. Therefore, in Morning at NTV, we decided to bring it a little bit closer for you to start getting into the mood with celebrating Women's Day, 8th March 2023. Now, the rapid spread of digital technologies is creating new opportunities for growth as well as development, especially in developing countries like Uganda. Yet the benefits of digitalization are not automatic, and women across different regions and continents still face multiple obstacles to succeed in the digital economy. Now, factors that hold women back are multi-dimensional. They relate to gender bias. There's also lower participation in decision-making processes, limited digital skills. There's also lack of trust and unequal access to funding, among others. Now, this leaves it unaddressed. Gender divides will continue to widen if we don't do something about it. However, a unique feature of e-commerce for women in the privileged relationship established in the digital economy to shape the digital ecosystems and finance for women in their countries and regions. Now, to analyze this, close to Women's Day, we do have Fiona Nambazira Luswata. She is the digital finance and innovation analyst, and also we do have Damali Sali, who is the chief programs and project officer at Private Sector Foundation in Uganda, and I'm most privileged to be hosting these ladies. I will start with my newest guest on this set on Morning at NTV. You're most welcome, Fiona, and how are you?
I'm fine, thank you so much. Thank you for having us today.
Okay. Yes. And Damali, you're most welcome to Morning at NTV once again.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be back.
Okay. So we hear this phrase digital economy and it sounds appetizing. And I know that with the evolution of the internet, so many things are being transformed into spaces that can be adopted and used by so many people. But let's go back to the basics. What is the digital economy? Allow me to start with Fiona.
Thank you so much. So the digital economy, I will start with a little background about UNCDF and what it is that we do. So my role, like you said, at UNCDF is a digital finance and innovation analyst. My role being to work with the different stakeholders to ensure that we integrate digital and innovation into the programs that we do. Going back to what UNCDF does, UNCDF is the UN body that has a mandate to provide capital. We provide that capital to enable innovation and digitization to the low-income earners. That's inclusion. Speaking directly to your question, however, the digital economy. Everyone talks about economy, you talk digital economy, you think money. But digital economy, we are talking about the usage of digital. Can be using your phone, can be using your computer to be able to access the different services. At UNCDF, we have different sectors, agriculture, medical education that we focus on. So how are you able to use digital to be able to access the services across the agriculture sector, across the medical sector, across the education sector? So when you talk about the digital economy, that is really what we're talking about. How are you able to take the conventional services, the way that they are provided, and be able to integrate digitalization, that's your computer, your tablet that we have here, and be able to see how can you change the way that we carry out the traditional services that we do.
Okay. And of course, PSFU is in the tradition of tapping into different economies with the sectors, empowering them in different ways. You've been doing a lot of pushing different sectors and players to resuscitate themselves post-COVID-19. And how have you jumped into digital economy to do that?
Oh, thank you. So as a private sector foundation in Uganda, one of our first and biggest mandate is on policy advocacy. So in terms of policy advocacy, we've been advocating for the lowering of the cost of, say, for example, data. The cost of you accessing a phone. We've been advocating for that because until people have access to a phone, especially women, especially the poor people, until everyone has access to a phone, it will be much more harder for us to mainstream or see financial inclusion in the digital economy. So we've been advocating for that for a very long time, and we continue to do so because we need to ensure that everyone at least has a phone, because you can't access a service, even a government service, if you do not have a phone easily. You can't access money easily if you do not have a phone. So access to a phone, an affordable phone, is critical. So we've been advocating for that. We need phones, handsets, like cheap handsets available in our economy, in our market. And that should be a mandate that is taken over by development partners, by the government, as a way to ensure that people actually, women have a handset so that they can then start talking about or think about talking about a digital economy. So first and foremost is that point of access. People need a handset. Even if it's a feature phone or a smartphone, they need the handset. Then from that point, we also need to ensure that the cost of data or the cost of airtime is now relatively low, but the cost of data has to also go down so that people can therefore now use these goods and services or access those services and then be able to trade on the phone. We've also been advocating for lowering the cost of moving money. If that cost continues to be high, which it is right now, if you're sending money from Airtel to MTN, it is very expensive. If I go to Kaleri to buy my tomatoes and I ask that lady, can I pay you your 10K on mobile money, she'll say no, because it's expensive for her.
Just withdrawing money, it's quite expensive.
Because it's expensive for her.
6,000 shillings that you've lost in the transaction.
Exactly. So we've been advocating for that low access to that handset. There has to be availability of those handsets so people can access them, so everyone has a phone. We need to lower the cost of data, and then also we need to ensure that the cost of transacting, moving money, because the digital economy is talking about buying and selling goods and services. There has to be a movement of money, but the movement of money is very high. So we've been doing quite a lot in that policy and advocacy space, which is where we are as private sector. We are a policy and advocacy body.
Okay. Fiona, in regards to this whole data thing that has been brought up, data issue is still a toddler here in Uganda. We do have the government wanting to inject a certain amount of money to create fiber connections here and there so they can extend this particular service to as many Ugandans. However, we're still struggling. One, limited bundles, and then they're expensive. You get 250 MBs for a lot of shillings, which is really unfair. Then it is slow after you getting it. More so, it cannot get you to do anything, because I've come to realize that when it comes to data, it's not that you have data. Is your phone a 4G smartphone? There's also that element. So how are you addressing that particular gap in realizing and formalizing the digital economy?
That's affordability, right? So yes, so it is great that the government is actually trying to address that, because infrastructure is important. Like Damilia said, you have to ensure that just because you have access to a phone, can you afford it? There was a study that has just been done by UNCDF in 2022, and actually the leading cause of inability to access digital for women is affordability. We thought social norms or lack of knowledge, and those actually did show up. However, affordability was key. So what can you do in affordability? So UNCDF is uses its pathways, that's financial and also technical expertise. Financially, we give grants, we give loans, and also blended finance. What we are actively doing is that we play in the sector where we encourage the private sector, come in, test your theories, test them. Can you innovate around how digital is able to impact? Through our partners, we are able to provide services like traceability. Those are ideally for private enterprise. It's expensive for them to do that. So when we come in as UNCDF and we are funding, are you able to track traceability along the agriculture value chain? Are you able to provide access to finance? That, and those are the active steps that we are doing. We're working through the private sector to finance them, to be able to test out, and then we make studies and see what is the impact of digital. Are the women able now to understand the impact of this technology that is being given to them? Do they now understand that, oh, if I go digital, because social norms sometimes impede women, but because UNCDF is coming to implement programs through the private sector, so the private sector can now go into the communities and say, okay, we are implementing a digital program. These women are now agents. They are getting money, finances. They're now able to say, okay, we can break those social norms which say, the phones are used to, maybe the men say phones break up marriages. All of a sudden they say, oh no, the phones and the digital is bringing income, the economy. So those are the active programs that we're doing. We have a number of programs that we do. We are supporting Norway. We have a program with Norway which is along the share nut value chain. So programs are around digital that enable the private companies to test out those digital channels, to develop digital integrations that they could ordinarily not have done. Then of course technical expertise to say what can you do, how can you innovate around what you're already doing, what is the impact. Measurement for us is very critical, because if you do not measure the impact and you're just implementing, then you cannot actually know the steps that you have made forward. So that's what we're doing through supporting the private sector, through providing finance, but also technical advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking at the effective measures that have been put to mitigate the negative economic impact, especially post-COVID-19, as a private sector, you get to have a few evaluations here of the role that now has been enhanced by the digital economy, and trying to have all countries and economies alongside the Belt and Road. Talk to us about this digital economy in terms of its impact to the growth of an economy such as Uganda, especially where women participation is concerned.
Okay. If you think about it, in our economy, you find that around 80% of the businesses that women do are informal. Because they are informal, they are unable to access so many different services. They can't get access to finance, they can't get several services that are available online, so they are naturally impeded. So imagine if we get that 80% of the informal businesses out of that cash economy into the digital economy. The impact it will have on the economy will be significant, the socio-economic impact, because when a female gets disposable income, say from a business, she puts 60% back into the business, 40% she uses it to feed her children, take them to school, clothe them, make sure they're healthy. So the socio-economic impact is greater to the economy because a woman has moved into the digital economy. So the economy itself benefits by ensuring that the woman is there. And for us, a lot of businesses actually, or female businesses, are informal, and we need to move that. You can't formalize if you're not traceable, if you're not active, if you can't be counted, if someone can't find you. So if a bank can't find you because there is no, you don't even have any digital transactions, you don't even have mobile money because you don't have a handset, how are they ever going to develop a product or a solution for you? So it's much more harder. So we need to ensure that we do that. You saw that in COVID, actually, when we shut down everything but markets. You found a lot of women who had even now were actually digital. The women who were selling stuff, say on Instagram, on Facebook and stuff, they struggled because the economy was shut down. So you find that when we digitize, or we ensure that the bigger part of the economy, or a larger part of the people in the economy are in the digital space, we as a country develop, and our GDP will increase, I think, by 0.5%, they say. So it's important that as an economy we do that. But also we need to look at, for those who are already transacting, for example, in the digital economy, who have mobile money, who are buying and selling things online, how easy is it for them to get real-time payments? That lady in Galleria I was telling you about, and they did this, say, for example, Jumia during COVID partnered with several markets. That I could buy my tomatoes in my house, and then Jumia will go to Galleria and pick them and then deliver them to me. But what would happen is that Jumia will deliver them to me, I'll pay my 10K to their delivery guy, so Jumia has the money. The lady has given me her tomatoes. She doesn't have the tomatoes, but she also doesn't have the money now. She'll get the money maybe 15 days later. In this entire chain, she's the poorest person, and we are the richest are keeping the money and making her poorer. So we need to ensure that these real-time payment, real time, so that the money that I pay in real time actually gets to her, even if I'm paying it through a third party. But that cost right now of real time payment, well, first of all, we don't have an infrastructure to enable real time payment, but so we need to do an instant payment switch as a country to be able to do the real time payments. But then secondly, the cost of that real time payment should be low. Because the reason why she prefer cash to say me paying her mobile money, even if I'm physically with her, is that for her to get that cash off, or to transact after the money is on her mobile money, is that it will cost her. So if she pays someone else with mobile money,
if she sold them at 10,000 shillings, she will maybe walk away with 7,000 shillings at the end of the day.
If she gets digital. So we need to, to really work on that and ensuring that, because until we do that, we'll continue to have a huge informal sector.
So how do we mitigate this problem, Fiona, in regards to making sure that losses are not incurred at the actual cost?
So I think what we need to do is, as stakeholders, private sector, the development space, how do we come up with programs, first of all, we need to be very intentional about how we intervene. When we are able to do studies, we have talked about it, we are doing different studies, we understand that, you know, men are more active in the digital space. But what are the challenges? So we have to be very, intentional about understanding the challenges. We cannot also continue to provide generic solutions for all the space and say, okay, these are the digital payments. Identify the challenges, come up with innovative solutions around that. Customize them for the particular sector. Where do women have challenges? How can we integrate them? Where are women most excluded? How can women understand better? Going back even to the grassroots, how do we engage to make sure that women have an early adoption for technologies? So, but specifically, I think to this question, it is that digital is just like any other service. If you say digital as a service, are you able to customize it for the particular audience in a particular sector and then provide solutions that work for them, not just for the digital service providers, but make sense for the user? It's only when you make sense for the user, you're giving them value. You're saying, oh, digital is bringing you value like this, not spending 10 days with somebody's money. If you are saying that digital is providing you with the ability to have money in real time, is providing you with the ability to increase your source of income, to reach markets beyond Amuria, then, and in real time, and increase your income, and you're able to pay school fees and access medical services, then that becomes relevant and we start to close the barriers slowly.
Okay, so this then comes back to the private sector. I know that, I mean, competition is paramount. There has got to be competition for us to have an economy in the first place. But in placing all this on table, how then can we encourage the market players to do to participate in the economy as a wholesome? For example, you do have a forum that is actually being the middleman to the one who has the product and the one who wants the product. And then there's a forum that can do delivery services in that very same space. And so creating a chain, a partnership chain that can be able to support everyone to get a piece of the pie.
That would be a fantastic solution. And it would be great, but you also need to bring the policy makers here. You also need to bring the government, the regulators here. So you need the Bank of Uganda, for example, to be in that same space, also speaking that same language, because this real instant payment system has to be regulated by the Bank of Uganda. You need Ministry of Finance that is going to be also, you know, has a regulatory aspect there. You need all the mobile network players to also be working together so that they can actually allow their payment systems to be integrated.
And of the ones that you have mentioned, which one have been responsive to this kind of dialogue?
Actually, for the mobile network players, they all have. They see a benefit in because for them it's really also about volumes, but it's also expensive for them to have all these infrastructure pieces that they're maintaining, when if we have a national backbone, they could just be integrating there. And then of course the higher volumes the better. So in a way there is a movement towards an acceptance that yes, we should have a national instant payment system. That's generally accepted. For the beneficiaries, i.e. the stakeholders, that lady in Kaleri, of course she would benefit. So she hasn't been necessarily contacted, but we know that she will benefit, because then she will benefit in that she will be able to now accept digital money without it costing her, and therefore she not needing to have cash on her, which is now very risky if she carries cash around. So in a way, there is I feel like there's a general movement towards that understanding. It's now we figuring out where the resources to do that infrastructure backbone. Really, that's where the road hits the road, because then government generally should pay, because it's a public service, it's a public good, this infrastructure backbone. So it needs to avail the money. But is the money available? Given that we just come out of COVID, we have lower tax revenues. The private sector has been hit in terms of cash flows. We're just trying to recover as a private sector. So the taxable profits available are much lower. You know, the needs are high. We have education, we have health. Is a national infrastructure backbone a priority? Then you see. Yeah, so that's where we are. But
also competition is good, you know, in itself. So competition creates an environment where the different players now start to think, how can I be better than the other person, right? So if everyone was providing generic services, or then the different actors start to think outside the box, which is what UNCDF funds. We have seen, much like Damali has said, different players, say MTN. Some of our projects we work in the refugee spaces. We have seen MTN come in and offer SIM cards to refugees at subsidized prices. Why? Because they understand the role that digital is playing. As the humanitarian space is giving money to the refugees, cash services. MTN understands that it is not even just about this cash. How can we innovate or become flexible around access to these digital platforms? So if they give subsidized SIM cards to the refugees, then they have a wide network of now clients that they can work with. So that competition in itself is actually creating lots of opportunities. The private sector is starting to actively think about how to get more people onto the digital spaces, because they do realize that that is the future. And then they also realize that it is only by getting the people to understand, how do I onboard, how do I use? Because once you have access, so they're saying, let's enable our clients to have access. Then usage comes later. So they phase it and they start to innovate around how do we ease access, and then after that, how do we enable usage?
Okay, you have talked about actively thinking. Damari, the government is actively thinking on milking the sector before it invests in the sector, in the digital economy. They're already thinking, how do they get to tax people on social media, on Instagram, selling their businesses and making their money on Instagram, people making their money on their WhatsApp statuses. So the government is already thinking of taxing before investing. And how do you intend to mitigate that?
I think with a lot of policy and advocacy work that we do. For example, right now we've been engaging the government so much on this instant and inclusive payment system, which they get. The government also is interested in financial inclusion, actually. So I feel like sometimes you have to make the right argument, because you find certain aspects of government wanting to get as much revenue from the current economy as possible, and they're looking for ways to get that revenue, because they need to fund these other social services. But then also another arm of government that has to think through what is the long-term impact of this. So we need to engage actively and then share this information. And
between you and me, we know
Yes.
that government first implements, then researches on what they have implemented. They did OTT,
Yes.
and then after 2 years, they scrapped OTT. It was not working.
Yes. I can't speak for government, but at least we can give him as much information as possible, so that they do that. For example, private sector foundation now to celebrate women entrepreneurs. What we are doing is that we are doing what we're calling Women's Day Katale. This is a 2-day event. It's going to happen at Uma Multipurpose Showground, and we are bringing women entrepreneurs to showcase. 150 women entrepreneurs are going to be given stalls for free to exhibit their wares, goods and or services over 2 days. So, and the idea is that we need to showcase these women. We need to show what they're doing. We need people to appreciate that women are actually actively involved in the economy, and they're contributing significantly to the GDP of the country. We are inviting several players to come and actually be part of that. So I feel like at some point we need to show what this is doing in terms of benefiting the general social economy for policymakers and technocrats to figure out what to do. We've been talking. She's just mentioned about competition. So competition is good, and sometimes competition supports innovation. But what has happened is sometimes, for example, in the mobile network space, there is a lot of competition, but they don't compete on price.
Yeah.
They are competing on getting as many people as possible. In the banking sector, you see that we have so many banks. We have about 20 banks. They're not competing, however, on access, affordability. They are competing on, okay, maybe how many more people can I get to bank with me, or how much treasury bills money can I get. So sometimes competition, some people may not compete on the right thing. So there has to be another incentive, another policy has to be part of that, because competition it does exist in the mobile network, but it hasn't lowered the cost of airtime. It hasn't lowered the cost of a handset. It hasn't lowered, and in other economies you find that a network such as, say, MTN or Airtel, those big networks normally would offer a handset, and then you pay it off very slowly, very cheaply. What they're doing there is ensuring actually that as many people have a handset. Whilst we've had competition for the last 20 years in Uganda in mobile network, in the technology space, we haven't had that level of competition where they've been able to incentivize. They've been in a way not lowering the cost. They've been competing on everything else but lowering the price.
Okay. Therefore, Fiona, what other ways can we ensure that we can attract more women to get involved in the digital market right now?
So affordability, we have talked about that. So I think knowledge. So I think there are two ways. One is digital knowledge. How? So we are saying access, and we are actively doing that. But are we able to also address usage? Once you address usage, and that is what is this technology being used for? So you are educating them, one, on how to access the platforms, but you're also educating them about what the value they're getting is. People buy value. So even when it's a little bit expensive, they understand that the value I'm getting. I'll give you an example. Sometimes you think that the cost of maybe an e-transfer is expensive, 5,000 shillings. But think of the time you spend to get into your car, get into your traffic jam, and then you go to the bank. Just to save 5,000, you've used fuel. Even if you use a boda, you're going to use 5,000 shillings. So what is that value? So it's educating them about the value they are getting. It's educating them about the usage. UNCDF has just been sponsoring a project. We're still doing it with Hive Collab, where we're doing a digital literacy. Sometimes we think that these women know how to use these platforms. When you go to the last mile, the underserved, women are not traditionally the holders of these phones that Damali is talking about. The men have ownership. Women have phones, or they have SIM cards. Men have ownership. So the women don't even know how to access all these services that we're talking about. How can we be better able to educate them so that they know that this is how we can use? But from the grassroots level, and also maybe not so last mile, is, say, STEM. How can we ensure that the younger generation is able to access technology and to learn and to make it make the standards the same for both boys and girls to study for STEM, because boys are more, it's more agreeable that boys are going to study science, technology. Girls, if they don't study, it's okay. So we push boys more, we push girls less. So that if we are able to push the girls, then there's starting to be recognition, adoption at a very early age. I think these are some of the ways that we can ensure that there's adoption from the women.
While that's a futuristic plan, the present times do have women, especially in the rural areas. Now, they are really doing everything in their power to earn a living, put bread on the table, and also have a living. At that point, that woman, her understanding of technology is a bit limited and challenged, of course, and then you get to have that there's not much programs or initiatives that are helping her to understand. So, Damali, with your experience and interaction with those that are trying to participate in the private sector, even at the smallest unit of transaction and commerce, what has been what are the hindering blocks for them in actually actively buying into the digital economy as women?
Okay. I think that the most critical one, because let's look for the cheapest one, a feature phone, a kabiriti, right?
Yeah.
The women are finding it expensive to even afford that kabiriti. And yet if you have a kabiriti,
40,000 onwards.
Exactly.
Okay.
And yet that kabiriti, automatically if she gets a kabiriti, whether she's on Airtel, MTN, whatever network she's on, automatically she has a digital wallet.
Okay.
So by the simple fact that she can't afford a kabiriti, can't get a kabiriti, means that she can never actually tap into the digital economy okay. because she can never actually transact. So we need that. That's why you find that almost while we have digital wallets and we've developed quite significantly in we becoming a digital economy, we have everything, every piece we need as an economy to become a digital economy we have, but we haven't become a digital economy because the majority of the population doesn't have that simple handset. And that's why you find that 90% of our cash, of our transactions are in cash. And yet we have every tool available to actually become digital. So the first stumbling block is that access to a phone. They need to be able to get a phone. If they can't get a phone, can't afford a phone, then it will be very hard for them to even participate in the digital economy. You can't now, you still have to send her money, cash. Everything she does has to be in cash. And that is very, very constraining, because cash on you is high risk. You can't, move it. You have to move with it physically. It's just...
Yeah, I remember back in the day, people would put cash in their socks just to go to the bank and do the banking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that I think that the primary stumbling block is that if we can unlock that at the very, very lowest bottom of the pyramid, the most munduably can get a feature phone. We're not even talking about smartphones, a feature phone.
Which is affordability, right?
Which is affordability. Then we will have solved that. But then also, if you think about, there are of our population, which is over 40 million, there are just 2.5 million people who are on the internet. 2.5 million. However, that doesn't stop us from getting a digital economy if everybody has a feature phone. So also, the preoccupation shouldn't be so much around, the smartphone is great, but if you want actual inclusion, start with making sure that feature phone is accessible and affordable. That way you automatically get everyone a digital wallet. Then they can move from a feature phone to the higher level.
Okay, while of course terms and conditions do apply, the one that stands at 40,000 shillings as a feature phone cannot really come down to aid or facilitate what we're talking about. I have seen different initiatives doing like savings programs, in targeted savings programs, to be able to help women attain these, for example, the future phone that you're talking about, or any other dreams that they have. Give them a target and have them work towards it. So are there any recommendations in that line that can actually aid women to come on board and actively get involved in the digital economy, Fiona?
Recommendations for accessing funds?
Not accessing phones, but really, in one way or another, tapping into the digital.
Yeah, so tapping into, so where I see the opportunity is how you use digital for financial inclusion, for example, right? Some of the programs that we're doing, and that is for the last mile, is how can digital be able to enable the last mile access digital inclusion? We know that Uganda's population is largely unbanked, but we also know that Uganda's population has telephones, right? So we are using, through our programs, we are providing services like digitization along the agriculture chain. We have some programs where we are digitizing apex bodies being like village savings and lending associations. When they save, we use that data, or the private sector, our partners, are using that data to be able then to create algorithms to lend to the end user. So what that is doing, it is actively engaging, one, in enabling the users to access finance, the users where women stand. So when you address the challenges of financial inclusion, women start to say, oh, we can now save through the village savings. If you go to the villages, at least 80% of women belong to village savings and associations. So when you go to them, we talked about customizing the services that we have to serve the last mile. Digitizing along the channels where the women are participating, like VSLS, enables them to actively participate. When they then see the ripple effect, we have seen the ripple effect of digitization, then we see an uptake in women becoming digital, understanding the impact, understanding that if I go digital, I can access finance. If I access finance, we start to break those barriers of lack of affordability. And then through, again, other programs like I talked about, we are able to teach them digital literacy. We do a lot of financial literacy. I'm sure Damali, they do that at PSFU, but digital literacy to make them understand how now do they learn.
Yeah.
All those come together to culminate into enabling this woman to understand. Many of them are illiterate. We are trying to translate these programs to speak local languages. So it is enabling them into financial inclusion so that, one, they can be able to afford digital. You've talked about the expense, getting that phone. So enabling them to have financial inclusion, because that is key, and it's a great attraction, whether it is male or female, but for women it is critical. If they know I can get school fees for my children, if I am enabled onto a digital platform, I can get a loan through my phone. All of a sudden, she's very excited to get this, to onboard onto digital. So those are some of the things that we can do, digital financial inclusion and digital literacy.
Okay. Recent data shows that the world is not on track to achieve the gender equality that we had pictured 2030. Of course, for global reasons. Now, of course, this being one of the UN Sustainable Development Agendas, how true is this, and how are we able to revise this so that we can still be able to make use of the time that we have left to 2030 to not leave anyone behind, especially women?
I think one of the most critical ones, you find that I think data has shown that only, if you look at the commercial loans that are given out from banks, only 14% of them are going to women. That's in Uganda. And this is despite the fact that Uganda has the highest number of women entrepreneurs in the world.
That right there. Isn't it debatable that it resonates with how few women are participating in the first place?
No. No. It's not, it's not that they are not asking for the loans. It's just that the barriers to get the loans are much more skewed for the woman. They're going to ask you for a land title. How many of us have land titles? They're going to ask for land title, automatically you're cut up. They're going to ask for, the interest rates are also very high, though they're high for everybody. But that barrier is incredibly high for asking for a title, a land title. In Uganda, there were about 2 million land titles, but they're mostly held by men. So naturally, even though Ugandan women entrepreneurs, who make up 40% of all entrepreneurs in Uganda, which is very high, it's the highest in the world, they're curtailed, they can't access finance. If you can't access money, you're not going to be a huge business person.
Right.
So if you look at the top 10 tech CEOs, the top 10 manufacturer CEOs, the women are not there, because when I start, it's going to be very hard for me to scale because I can't get access to a commercial loan compared to my male counterpart who may have started with me, but they can access because they're happy to have a land title. So naturally, money plays a huge part in gender, in we trying to get to that gender equality. As long as you don't have access to money, then you're going to struggle in every particular way. So we need to ensure that that access to, not just access, but also affordable, though the affordability is a problem for everyone, but access for women is much more harder, much more difficult. So it's not like as if we women are not trying to, to hustle, to work hard, to, do it. It's just that we have certain barriers that are inherent in the way the system is. So the banking system, for example, inherently curtails women as long as you ask for a land title for me to actually do my business, even if I'm a wonderful business person.
Yeah, which land title is in your husband's name. So
exactly.
In this regard.
She has a land title.
Let's talk about this goal by the UN in terms of gender equality. Where do we stand in actually achieving this, especially as far as involving women in the digital economy is concerned?
Yes, so I mean, you already spoke about the gap, and we are behind. But what are we doing actively, and what can we do? I think as stakeholders, whether private or public, it is how can we intentionally create programs that integrate gender. Many of us make programs and we say 70% should be women, but are we actually creating and writing the programs when we are conscious of the barriers that these women are facing? When we talk about programs like, let's say you do a digital literacy program and you're using computers, and you're saying 70% should be women, are the women able to access? When you say 70% women, are the women able to access it in that language? So there are so many barriers. But one of the things that we are not creating programs, we're not programming with the intention of integrating women. We are programming and we are putting the women numbers, but we are not intentionally integrating the challenges. So for example, at UNCDF, we have a gender specialist. There's UN Women. So we actively integrate the gender aspect in everything that we do, whether it is a refugee program, a medical program, education, agriculture, in that sector. What are the challenges unique to women? Because our mandate as UNCDF is digital access. What are the challenges of women around agriculture, around medical, around education? what are the challenges of women in Akivale as opposed to the women in Gulu, so that when we make the program, it is sector focused, it is region focused.
Right.
We are doing a lot of programming in the North and West Nile, but then also doing in the refugee settlements. So the challenges are different. So the programming from the grassroots level, from program design, we have to be very intentional and know that if we do not define how we want these women to be integrated, but just put the numbers to tick a box, I'd like to put it that way, then the divide will continue. But if as implementers of programs, as stakeholders, we are intentional about integrating women from program design, I think we can be able to close that gap.
Okay, so while we want to tap into the digital economy, we've got to also have digital protection for these women. There's theft, there's hacking, there's fraud all over the internet as we speak today. And so with already the illiteracy levels that we have just for digital involvement or engagement, how much more, you know, for what happens on that space when they get to engage in that space. And then also the vulnerability of women, we can easily get enticed and attracted by things here and there, and we end up making losses in one way or another. So how do we get to then protect these women as they embrace the digital economy and be able to maybe identify and protect themselves from these threats that present themselves with the digital economy? Damali.
Okay, I think we've seen examples where we've gotten, I think the biggest threat to a digital economy is the hacking, the cybersecurity has to be really, really strong. And we've seen instances in Uganda where we've got, say, certain mobile networks where, you know, things happen and money was stolen. When
something happens, they give up. They stole my money the other time.
Then you're like, you're done. Certain banks involved.
setting.
But I think the good thing that we've done in our economy is that the individual hasn't been affected. So at least there are protections within our economy that have ensured that the individual is protected. It didn't matter that there was a hit on the mobile networks and they lost money. There was a hit on a certain bank and it lost money. The individual who was banking with them, the individual who had money with that network didn't actually lose their money. So we have that general protection in that either they are highly insured or somehow the government and them sorted it out.
Okay.
So that is a pretty good protection, because the first protection, of course, has to be protection for your money. Is your cash safe? If I put and that's a big problem actually trying to get people in the digital economy, is my money on that mobile phone really there?
All right.
So, but luckily for us, we've been able to, there's a certain trust in that money, on their mobile money, that it is there. And the good thing is that the few times we've had instances where money has been hacked and stolen, the individual hasn't suffered that cost.
All right, well, thank you so much. Now, Women's Day messages, the day's around the corner. Fiona, what's your message to the women as we close this conversation?
Yeah, so my message to the women, when we look at digital, that is the theme for this year, right? Digital is something that we have to embrace as a community, as individuals, to understand digital not just as a passing fad, but as a necessity that is coming in to be integrated into all aspects of our day-to-day life, all aspects of our businesses, to understand digital as an enabler for growth, as an enabler for change, but also to encourage us in our different spaces as entrepreneurs, as drivers of change, as women leaders, to be sure to promote the use and uptake of digital and start to communicate what are those services that digital is able to deliver to us, and then to trickle down that information to the underserved so that they can join the world that is digital. Thank you.
All right. Damali, you talked about the Katali Day. Yes. Private Sector Foundation is doing the Women's Day Katali. Is it going digital?
Yes. And let me just give a little bit of background. So Private Sector Foundation Uganda, in partnership with MasterCard Foundation, we are doing a Women's Day Katali. We did the first season in Luwero, so we wanted these informal women to be, and 100 of them participated with several huge public sector. Then this year we brought it to Kampala. It's going to be at Multipurpose Hall. We're going to have 150 stalls for women to exhibit. Women entrepreneurs can exhibit their goods and services. It is free. So all you have to do is just go on our social media networks. You'll find the information there on how you can access the store.
Private Sector Foundation Uganda?
Yes, Private Sector Foundation Uganda. So, and it's free. So if you want to exhibit your goods or services Friday and Saturday
This coming
week,
Friday?
yes, this week, you can actually just call our number. We will take your details, and then you'll be able to exhibit, and it's free. In addition to that, people are invited to come in. It's also free. So you can come and buy and sell the goods. But also what we learned is in our last Katali that we did in Luweero, the women asked us that we are informal, but maybe we want to know how URA works, how our URSB can actually register our businesses. So this year we have Uganda Registration Services Bureau. It will be there on site, ready to register anyone. It could be the person exhibiting or any person who's walked in. You will be able to register your business there. They have what we're calling a business clinic. We also have URA, so you'll be able to get your TIN instantly if you walk in. And then also we have Uganda National Bureau of Standards. So if you're a woman entrepreneur and you have your goods you want to exhibit, but you don't know if they meet the standard, how can you get the standard? UNBS is going to be there. Then we also have a tech business clinic that's going to be run by Safe Border. We have a creative business clinic, because a lot of young people are actually in the creative sector now. So we have a creative business clinic that's going to be run by Zeus, the agency. Also, if you want to know anything about the creative sector, they'll teach you. So we'll have this all free Friday and Saturday. You can walk in. If you're a woman entrepreneur and you want to exhibit, just call us.
All right, thank you so much, Damali. And that closes the conversation on women involvement in the digital economy.